Will you join me in prayer? Let the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. It's amazing how much power a single syllable can wield. If it's only two letters, single consonant paired with a single vowel, but it has the power to stop us in our tracks. If inserted at the beginning of a sentence can suddenly cause us to second guess ourselves. If you are absolutely sure this is right, if can instantly melt our strong resolve. If you decide to go down this path, there is no turning back. If is a qualifier. As a conjunction, if connects two clauses and makes them conditional so that you can't have one without the other. If you are nice to me, then I'll think about giving you what you want. As a noun, if indicates uncertainty. There are too many ifs in this proposal to feel confident moving forward with it at this moment. Inserting the word if makes whatever follows after it conditional. It's a qualifier that we use to indicate that the outcome is not a foregone conclusion. Rudyard Kipling wrote a famous poem entitled If to his son. It's only 4 stanzas long, but it contains 13 lines that begin with the qualifier if. And all of those ifs have to be satisfied before you qualify for the resolution that comes in the very last line. If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs. If you can trust yourself when all men doubt you. If you can wait and not be tired by waiting. If you can dream and not make dreams your master. If you can think and not make thoughts your aim. If you can meet with triumph and disaster. If you can bear to hear the truth you've spoken twisted. If you can make one heap of all your winnings and risk it all on one turn of pitch and toss. If you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve your turn long after they're gone. If you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue. If neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you. If all men count with you, but none too much. If you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, then you'll be a man, my son. Kipling's poem reminds us that being a man isn't simply a factor of aging. There is a maturity of spirit that must accompany our transition into manhood. There are a lot of ifs attached. It doesn't happen automatically. It probably would have been a wise thing to have read Kipling's poem at the beginning of Thursday night's political debate. The single syllable if stops us in our tracks and makes us pause to consider whether or not we have fulfilled the necessary conditions. Sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes that pause calls us to our better selves. That's what Kipling's poem does so beautifully. But today, in our passage from Luke's Gospel, we heard the word if used as a tool for evil to undermine a person's confidence. If, inserted into the beginning of a sentence, can be used to sow the seeds of self-doubt. That's what the devil was hoping to do when he encountered Jesus in the wilderness. Every temptation that Jesus wrestled with in the wilderness began with the qualifier, if. If you are the Son of God, then exploit that privilege and satisfy your own hunger. If you are the Son of God, then step up and use that power to bend everything that happens in the world to your will. If you are the Son of God, then maximize your celebrity status and draw everyone's attention to you. Each of the devil's ifs, subtle and seductive qualifiers. They suggested that Jesus was lacking in some way, that he had something to prove, that his authenticity was in question. If you are the Son of God, then prove it. Each time the devil used the word if, it suggested that Jesus was under suspicion of fraud. What was subtle about each of the devil's temptations was that they weren't challenging Jesus to do anything hurtful or destructive or bad. The proofs that the devil asked for were all good things. There's nothing wrong with bread. Oprah eats it every day. It's the staff of life. And who better to rule all the nations of the earth than Jesus? Instead of power-hungry megalomaniacs, we could have the embodiment of God's love ruling over all the earth. Isn't that the future that we pray for week after week whenever we say the Lord's Prayer? Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Why not Jesus? Why not get some good publicity for Jesus? Why should terrorists and criminals and news of atrocities and scandal dominate our headlines? Why not celebrate the amazing feats of the one who comes in the name of the Lord? The devil wasn't tempting Jesus to do anything bad. He was making helpful suggestions for all of the good things that Jesus could do if, in fact, he was the person he claimed to be. If you are the Son of God. That single syllable, if, inserted into the beginning of each sentence, is what turned these good things into corrupting temptation. The if made Jesus' self-identity conditional. It suggested that he had to prove himself worthy of who he is. The devil had hoped to sow the seeds of self-doubt in Jesus. If you are the Son of God, prove it. That conversation between the devil and Jesus in the wilderness stands in stark contrast to the conversation that God had with Jesus just before Jesus began his 40-day wilderness sojourn. In chapter 3 of his gospel, Luke tells us that when Jesus was baptized in the Jordan River at the hand of John, God spoke to him and said, "You are my Son, the beloved. With you I am well pleased." You are my Son, the beloved. With you I am well pleased. There were no ifs in God's conversation with Jesus. There were no qualifiers, no conditions that first had to be met before the then became effective. The pronouncement of God's love was unconditional. You are my Son, the beloved. With you I am well pleased. But immediately after his baptism, when Jesus was weak and famished and vulnerable from fasting 40 days in the wilderness, Jesus was tempted to second-guess himself. To imagine that there were qualifiers attached to his identity as God's beloved. That he would have to prove himself worthy. That he would have to demonstrate his power and authority. That he would have to astonish the masses with miraculous feats. Just a one-syllable word. Just a single vowel paired with a single consonant. Just starting each sentence with if was all that was necessary to tempt Jesus into questioning his true self. But Luke tells us that each time Jesus was tempted by the devil, he reached back into the lessons of his tradition and recovered the wisdom of the faith that had shaped his faith. It is written, "One does not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the Father." It is written, "Worship the Lord your God and serve only him." It is written, "You shall not put the Lord your God to the test." Jesus was able to resist the devil's temptation because the faith tradition that had shaped his own faith reminded him of his true identity. He had learned to trust the voice of God. That's why it's so important for us to gather in this space week after week after week. Worship helps us trust the right voice. It helps us trust the voice of God. There will always be other voices tempting us to doubt ourselves. When we are weak, when we are vulnerable, when we are lonely, whenever we are struggling and feeling overwhelmed, there will always be tempters who will prey on our insecurities by inserting ifs into the beginning of our own inner thoughts. We are always tempted to believe that we have to prove our own worthiness, that we have to impose our will on others in order to claim our own power and authority, that we have to win recognition from others in order to feel good about who we are. But the work of the church is to call everyone back to their baptismal identity. It is to constantly remind each other of the truth that was first celebrated when we participated in the baptism of Jesus. That we are all God's beloved sons and daughters. That God is already well pleased with us apart from anything we have done or anything we will do. There were no conditional clauses in the promises that the congregation made to us when they welcomed us into the bond of Christian fellowship. We were anointed with the waters of God's unconditional love, and the work of the church is to wash away the ifs of everyone's self-doubts and everyone's insecurities. Whenever the voice of the devil causes people to pause and begin questioning their own worth, our work is to restore their confidence in the voice of God. Amen.